Are there advantages to aging? Yes, I am Debbi-Jo Horton, and welcome to Advantages to Aging. Join my guests and I as we discuss aging and what makes for a healthy lifestyle, which results in a quality life. Thank you for joining me today. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Tips on Tuesday, Advantages to Aging podcast. And I am DJ Horton, your hostess with the mostest. I got to have fun with it this time. And with me today, I have Ellie Anbinder from Caregivers Well-Being. And we're going to talk today about something that I know a lot of people worry about or think about, but are afraid to actually ask the questions or start the discussion. So we're going to say welcome, Ellie, and then we're going to get started with the conversation of dementia and Alzheimer's. So welcome, Ellie.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Awesome. So, is there a difference between Alzheimer's and dementia? I know sometimes they're used, oftentimes very interchangeable.
There is definitely a difference between one is overlapping of the other. So let me explain. Dementia is not a disease. Dementia is a term used to discuss symptoms of diseases. So think about an umbrella. Dementia is the large, overwhelming part of the umbrella. After you open it, the top of the umbrella, and you see the spokes underneath the umbrella. Those are different kinds of dementia. Dementia also fits under the category of memory impaired diseases. Of all of the dementia diseases, of which there are many, the four or three or four most commonly thought about and talked about are Alzheimer's, Lewy body, vascular dementia, and the fourth one, which I can't remember right this minute. I will come back and say to you that Alzheimer's accounts for about 60 or 70% of dementia diagnosis.
Wow.
So when people say, my mom, my husband, my loved one has dementia, the question always is, what does that mean? What kind? You don't really have a little bit of dementia. You have some disease that falls under that umbrella. Hard to explain and hard to explain to people. I hope I made that clear.
Well, and the visual of the umbrella is very, very helpful because I know a lot of times people will say, well, they died of dementia.
Right.
And it's like,
No, they died of some dementia illness.
right. Or the fact that their brain stopped telling the rest of their body what to do. So
That's exactly right. It stops telling them to beat the heart. That's exactly right.
yeah, so that's really interesting. And I think that in one of our conversations you said that Parkinson's sometimes falls underneath that umbrella
I
too.
think that's true. That's true.
That's
Um,
interesting.
because again, Parkinson's has to do, and I'm an expert unwillingly about Alzheimer's. I'm not a Parkinson's
Yeah.
expert, so I don't want to talk about Parkinson's symptoms other than to say it is part of what happens when the brain isn't fine. Something causes the brain to do something that other than what it's supposed to.
Interesting. So can you give us an idea? Are there warning signs that we could be looking out for? And do they appear all at once or do they appear over time?
They absolutely do not appear all at once, at least in my experience. My experience involved my husband who had Alzheimer's for 10 years, but it was a really slow downhill battle, if you will. Initially, I'll be very candid with you and say to you, I didn't recognize them at all. I came from a family with a grandmother and a mother who had Alzheimer's, so I thought it was going to be me. Whoever knew that it was going to be my husband, what a shock. The symptoms of Alzheimer's, in my experience and from other people I know, of course, appear slowly. which is why they're so unidentifiable, if you will. Yes, he couldn't remember where his keys were, but then so I created a system where he put them there every day. So that seemed like, okay, now he's got his keys. He couldn't remember certain names. So let me give you some of the symptoms so you understand what I'm saying. And then I'll go
Okay.
back and talk a little bit about some examples. So impaired memory loss is really a very big one. Again, remember these come slowly, so it's hard to identify. Is that Alzheimer's? Is that what is going on here? Cognitive changes, so language problems, can't reviving words, um, mood changes,
Mm.
either very happy, very sad, could be depression, probably all of them. Personality changes, social problems, and physical problems, slowing down, those kinds of things in terms of physical activity. But you can see how, in any one of those symptoms, depending on the person you're talking about, it doesn't necessarily become the symptom.
Right. I can see any of those things as, you could experience those just because you're tired. Like if you've been
Or
super busy and then, like all of a sudden that busyness stops, I could see you like getting confused or slowing down. So, yeah, I could see how it would be hard to pick up on it right away.
I would say also because dementia, not early onset dementia, that is something that happens to a small part of the population in the 50s. And that's a pretty more obvious kind of um,
Yeah.
Alzheimer's. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, I mean, there was a famous book called Still Alice and a movie but that was early onset. That's not what we're really talking about. That 60 or 70% statistics that I mentioned to you is really for people that are older. So, and that's why also, if we're talking about the older population, you think, well, okay, so dad's getting a little older, he's forgetting things.
Mm.
Okay, that's normal. But it's not normal when you put all these other,
When it add it together. So I
yes.
think that kind of brings me to my next question is, okay, so how can I tell whether my loved one is experiencing the onset of some type of dementia or Alzheimer, and what should I do about what I'm noticing?
Um, well, let me tell you a quick little story about how I came to figure out what to do about this for my husband. I have two adult daughters who kept saying to me, Mom, you notice my voice changes to adult daughters. Mom, Dad's forgetting a lot. And, I was a busy professional working, and I had a lot of things on my mind. And Dad forgetting things wasn't one of them because long term marriage, you think, okay, he's ignoring me. It's fine. But I did get him tested simply, very candidly, because I wanted to stop the pressure on Dad's forgetting things. And the very early diagnosis was that he had something called mild cognitive impairment. What that means is that's step one before you go to other things. I
Mm.
didn't know that at that time. And what it did was made me, but he was still driving, he was still working. So he's a little impaired, aren't we all at times? But then I started to watch things. And here's a few things. I'll give you a couple of examples. My husband was the person who cooked in our house. And all of a sudden, he didn't want to cook anymore.
I
And
could kind of relate to that.
well, I mean, I've never cooked in my whole married life, so it wasn't a thing to me other than the fact that I worried I was going to starve to death. Clearly that didn't happen. But it took me a long time to figure out it was the sequence of the things he was cooking, which he was a master at, because I never ate food that didn't all come to the table all hot at the same time. All of a sudden that wasn't happening. An example of cognitive changes. Maybe your loved one likes to do crossword puzzles or reads books and they stop doing that. Again, gradual. Or maybe they stop going on the computer and you think, oh, well, so what? Again, it's this number, the sequence of coming on, it's finding the program. Maybe I should worry since I couldn't get on Zoom today, but
Oh, Ellie.
uh,
But okay, so I think we're all seeing the picture that, like we should be paying attention to the sequence of those things, or am I hearing you right that it's the number of times it's happening? Like,
both.
oh, okay, so both. So what's
And
happening and
cumulative.
how much time in between each of those episodes?
Right. It's cumulative. Personality changes. Some people get very aggressive and angry. I'm glad to say my husband got very sweet, which was
Kind of nice, I bet.
kind of. Most people, when they realize that something is not right with them, get pretty depressed. And, sometimes you start with the psychopharmacologist who gives them Zoloft or something because they want to kind of tap it down. Social problems, somebody who's always been outgoing and friendly suddenly gets very much withdrawn. But again, remember, depression can show itself to be a symptom, but it may not be the symptom.
Right.
Debbi-Jo with Neora. You know what our brand partners love the most about their Neora business? They can do it from anywhere. Think about it. Haven't you always wanted to have your own schedule, be your own boss, maybe even have a global business and be able to run it from your favorite coffee shop or lounging by the pool or seaside, not having to go into the office? We make sure that all of our brand partners have all of the tools they need to run their business while fitting it into their busy lives. So if that's something that you've been curious about, what it might be like for you to be able to do life on your own terms, then I think we need to chat.
When we start noticing these things, who should we be going to? Should we be going to the physician that's always taking care of them? Or are there other resources that we should be, checking into? Like, what would be the next step? Because it's not always obvious.
That is the most important step. And here's what you should be looking for. When you need to get the symptoms checked, any ongoing memory loss requires medical attention along with one or more of the other symptoms. So just because he couldn't find his keys is not necessarily, oh my God, we're off to the neurologist.
Right.
But any of the other things that are grouped with it could be something to look at. And the person you go to, sure, you can go to your PCP, but they're not neurologists, they're PCPs.
Right.
You should be going to a place that specializes in memory testing because they have a whole group of cognitive tests. They may order an MRI. An MRI shows whether the brain is starting to, I'm very visual, as you know, for lack of a better way of saying it, shrink a little bit. And you do a baseline MRI so they can watch if it holds and it doesn't change, maybe it's mild, but
right. So it's important to go to a professional versus, I know there are like all these tests online, but if you're not a professional, how do you really know how to read those results of those tests?
Precisely. It's really important because I could never have understood what those tests meant. And the problem with the diagnosis is that the only diagnosis that's absolute that you had Alzheimer's is an autopsy. That's pretty bad.
That is pretty bad. Hopefully you don't need that test.
Right. Well, not right away. But it's really important because after a diagnosis, I mean, that's when people call me and say, what do I do now, Elle? After the diagnosis, there are all kinds of changes that you need to think about for your loved one, your family, your finances, all kinds of things that you need to make sure are in order, because the road forward is definitively not as much fun as the road backward that you came out of. So professional testing, asking the right questions, having someone who can advocate and help you with the right questions. So, that's why I took the experience I had with my husband and turned it into helping people who are caregivers know what to ask and how to ask it, because there's so much you don't know.
Yeah.
Not like
Well, I am so glad that we started this conversation. I am sure that it's going to really start people thinking and paying more closer attention. And I am going to ask Ellie to come back to talk more about what happens once you know for sure that your loved one is experiencing those signs and what we can do to help prepare ourselves for that journey. Thanks so much, Ellie. This has been so informative.
I enjoyed talking with you.
Do you think one of the biggest advantages to aging is all the knowledge we gain along the way? Me too. What did you learn today? Share with me in my Facebook group with the same name as this podcast, Advantages to Aging. Now hit subscribe so you don't miss all the tips to come in future episodes.